This story is titled, "My girlfriend went on Twitch stream to show off to everyone about sleeping with another guy and called me a loser. She was happy that our wedding party would be canceled. Her face turned stone cold when she realized I was watching the stream." Hey Reddit, my name is Marcus, and I'm 36 years old. What I'm about to tell you happened about 8 months ago, and honestly, I'm still processing how spectacularly everything unraveled. It all started when my fiance's friend decided to go live on Instagram during their girls' night. Brianna, being the genius she apparently is, started bragging about how she was essentially playing me for a fool. I happened to see the stream and dropped a comment that changed everything. She completely freaked out, and within 45 minutes, she was at my door with her mother, both of them screaming. What followed was absolute chaos that I'm still dealing with the aftermath of today. I was engaged to Brianna, who was 29 at the time. We had been together for 3 years after meeting through a mutual friend at a car show in downtown Nashville. The connection seemed natural at first. We both enjoyed the social scene, and she seemed genuinely interested in what I did for work. I own a custom car restoration shop that I built from the ground up over the past decade. It's something I'm incredibly proud of, and we specialize in classic American muscle cars and high-end custom builds that require serious expertise and attention to detail. My business has developed a solid reputation in the Nashville area and beyond. We currently have a 7-month waiting list for custom builds, which is both a blessing and a challenge. There's also a steady stream of restoration work from collectors who won't trust their vintage Mustangs or Camaros to anyone else. These aren't just cars to these people. They're investments, memories, and pieces of automotive history that require the utmost care and precision. I grew up with a wrench in my hand, learning everything from my father who ran his own auto shop until he retired. My mother managed the books and handled the business side of things. Between the two of them, they taught me the most important lessons of my life: how to build something that lasts, and more importantly, how not to get screwed financially. My dad always used to say, "In business and relationships, you need to know exactly what you're signing up for." Looking back now, I wish I had listened to that advice more carefully when it came to Brianna. Brianna's father, Colonel Williams, is a retired Marine colonel who started a successful security consulting firm after leaving the Corps. He's a stand-up guy who always treated me with respect and genuine appreciation. He understood my work ethic and business sense in a way that impressed me. Colonel Williams would often show up at the shop just to talk cars and discuss business strategy. It was clear that he had his head on straight and understood what it meant to build something meaningful with your own hands. I once overheard him tell his wife Patricia how much he respected what I was doing with my life and business. Brianna's mother, on the other hand, was a completely different story. Patricia was the classic country club trophy wife who had leveraged her looks into marrying money and had never worked a day in her life. She made absolutely sure that everyone knew their family was Belle Meade material, the kind of old-money Nashville neighborhood that comes with serious social expectations. Patricia tolerated me at best, and even that was being generous. She had this infuriating habit of constantly dropping hints about how Brianna's ex-boyfriend Brett was now making real money in some corporate job that she considered more respectable than my little shop. Every single time I came to dinner at their house, Patricia would ask me about my little shop with this condescending tone, like I was running a lemonade stand instead of a successful business with multiple employees and a 7-month waiting list. The way she said it made it clear that she viewed my work as some kind of hobby rather than a legitimate career that was actually quite profitable and well-respected in the automotive community. Brianna herself was genuinely different from the women I had typically dated in the past. She was completely obsessed with social media and always chasing the latest trends, constantly trying to position herself as some kind of lifestyle influencer. She worked part-time at some trendy boutique downtown where she made decent money, but she spent far more time dreaming about becoming a social media influencer than actually focusing on her work or building any real skills. I lost count of how many hours she would spend setting up the perfect Instagram shot of something as simple as her morning coffee. She would rearrange the lighting, try different angles, take dozens of photos, and then spend even more time editing and crafting the perfect caption. Then, in the same breath, she would complain that she couldn't afford the down payment on a Range Rover that she absolutely had to have, because it would look better in her Instagram posts. Her family definitely had money. Not oil-rich billionaire money, but comfortable enough that Brianna had never really learned the value of a dollar, or what it meant to work for something you wanted. Everything had always been provided for her, and she had developed this expectation that life should continue that way. My previous relationships had been with women who had their own careers and ambitions, women who were building something meaningful with their lives. With Brianna, I constantly felt like I was the only responsible adult in the relationship, always having to be the one thinking about practical matters while she lived in this fantasy world of social media fame. But I have to admit, she was beautiful and fun to be around when she wanted to be. When Brianna focused her attention on you, it felt like being in a spotlight. There was this rush of energy and excitement that was genuinely intoxicating. Looking back now, I realize I mistook that temporary rush for something much deeper and more meaningful than it actually was. I confused the excitement of being chosen by someone so focused on appearances with genuine love and partnership. Looking back now, there were definitely warning signs that I chose to ignore at the time, like when my shop won a local business award last year. A pretty significant recognition in the automotive industry that I was genuinely proud of. Instead of coming to the ceremony to support me, Brianna bailed at the last minute because she had gotten an invitation to some influencer event that she was convinced could be her big break. Her exact words were, "It's just cars, Marcus. This could be my big break." She didn't even bother to send a text message asking how the ceremony went or whether I had actually won the award. There were countless other moments like that. Whenever I would get excited about a new custom build project and try to share my enthusiasm with her, she would just scroll through Instagram while I was talking. She would occasionally look up from her phone just long enough to say, "That's nice," in this completely disinterested tone, and then immediately ask if we could eat somewhere more Instagrammable than my favorite BBQ joint, a place I'd been going to for years and where the owner actually knew my name. She even had the audacity to suggest that I rebrand my entire shop with what she called a more aesthetic color scheme. When I asked her what she meant, she said, "Black and chrome is so dated, Marcus. You need something that photographs better for social media." I nearly choked on my drink when she said that. Black and chrome isn't just some random design choice. It's classic, it's timeless, and it perfectly represents the kind of work we do. But to her, everything had to be evaluated through the lens of how it would look on Instagram. Then there was the weekend I spent rebuilding a classic 1967 Mustang Fastback, a project that consumed 65 hours of my life over the course of several weeks. I had to source rare parts from collectors across 3 different states, and I spent countless hours solving mechanical problems that would have made most people throw in the towel and give up entirely. When I finally finished the restoration, I was so proud of the work that I asked Brianna to come see the completed car. She walked into my garage, glanced at the Mustang for maybe 3 seconds, and I'm being generous with that estimate, and then said, "Honestly, they all look the same to me. I don't know why you waste so much time on this stuff." That comment hit me harder than I expected it to, and it stuck with me for weeks afterward. This wasn't just any car, it was a piece of automotive history that I had brought back to life with my own hands. But to her, it was just another old car that didn't deserve her attention. The red flags kept coming during our house hunting process. When I showed her a property that had the perfect 3-car garage and workshop space, something that would have been ideal for expanding my business and working on personal projects, she immediately asked if we could convert the entire garage into a content creation studio. "That's where the real money is," she said with complete seriousness. When I pointed out that my actual work was what paid our bills and allowed us to even consider buying a house in the first place, she rolled her eyes and said, "For now, Marcus, but once I hit 100,000 followers, we'll be on a completely different level financially." The thing was, she had been stuck at around 4,200 followers for the entire time we had been dating. Her follower count never seemed to grow significantly despite all the time and effort she put into her posts. But she remained convinced that her big breakthrough was just around the corner. The proposal happened 11 months ago, and looking back, I realize how much effort and money I put into making it perfect for someone who didn't truly appreciate any of it. The engagement ring alone cost me nearly $4,500, and I spent another $10,000 on having a custom ring designed specifically for her. I spent weeks planning every detail of the proposal, coordinating with the restaurant staff to make sure everything would go exactly as I had envisioned it. When the moment finally came, she said yes, started crying, and then posted about it on social media within 25 seconds of putting the ring on her finger. We set the wedding date for October, and the planning process began immediately. We booked a beautiful venue, paid all the required deposits, and confirmed our guest list of 180 people. By this point in our relationship, I had already invested about $25,000 in various deposits and prepayments for the wedding. What's particularly galling is that Brianna had contributed exactly $0 to any of these wedding expenses. Whenever I brought up the mounting costs, or suggested that maybe she could contribute something to the budget, she would just laugh and say, "My job is to look beautiful, Marcus," as if that was somehow a reasonable division of financial responsibility. To cover all these wedding expenses, I had been putting in extra hours at the shop, taking on high-margin custom jobs, and expanding our service department to bring in additional revenue. The business was actually growing because of all the extra work I was taking on, so I didn't mind too much at the time. I kept telling myself that it was an investment in our future together, and that we would both benefit from having a memorable wedding. But the cash reserves I had carefully built up over years of hard work were definitely taking a significant hit, and I was starting to feel the financial pressure. Last Tuesday night was supposed to be just another routine girls' night for Brianna and her friends. I was at home that evening, working on blueprints for a custom Chevelle SS build that had been commissioned by a collector in Memphis. I had the Predators game on in the background, only half watching while I focused on the technical drawings and specifications for the restoration project. That's when I happened to notice that Brianna's friend Madison had started a live stream on Instagram. The stream was titled Bride Tribe Confessions, which should have been my first clue that this wasn't going to be the innocent wedding planning discussion I initially assumed it would be. Madison has always been the type of person who runs her mouth without engaging her brain first. She's been Brianna's best friend since their college days, and honestly, I've always found her about as authentic as a $3 Rolex watch. But curiosity got the better of me, and I clicked on the stream expecting to see some harmless wedding planning nonsense, or maybe some gossip about people I didn't know. What I saw instead changed everything. There was Brianna sitting front and center with Madison and 3 other friends, Jess, Zoe, and my cousin's wife Jessica, who I had always considered a friend and someone I could trust. The casual, relaxed atmosphere immediately told me that they had been drinking for a while, and their inhibitions were clearly lowered. The conversation started innocently enough, but it quickly took a turn that made my blood run cold. Madison looked directly at Brianna with this smug expression that I'd seen countless times before and asked, "So real talk, how's he really holding up with all this wedding planning? Is he still doing that annoying thing where he tracks every penny of the wedding budget?" Brianna actually snorted with laughter at that question, and what came out of her mouth next hit me like a punch to the gut. "Oh my God, Marcus is such a dumbass," she said with this dismissive tone that I'd never heard her use when talking about me directly. "He thinks this whole wedding is just about ticking boxes, budgets, and timelines. He has absolutely no clue about the real stuff that's going to happen once we're married." She paused for dramatic effect, clearly enjoying having the attention of her audience before continuing. "Like how I'm going to completely redecorate that man cave of his the minute we get back from our honeymoon." Madison cackled with delight at this revelation, encouraging Brianna to continue. "Please tell me you're not serious," she said, though her tone made it clear she hoped Brianna was completely serious. Brianna waved her hand dismissively, as if what she was about to say was the most obvious thing in the world. "That garage workshop is literally the first thing to go," she announced with satisfaction. "I've already got a contractor lined up to convert it into a proper filming studio and walk-in closet. Marcus can rent space somewhere else if he wants to play with his cars." I felt my stomach drop when I heard those words. That workshop wasn't just a garage to me. It was my sanctuary, a space I had built with my own hands over the course of several years. I had wired it exactly how I needed it, with specialized equipment and custom storage systems that I had designed myself based on years of experience and specific workflow requirements. It represented everything I had worked for and everything I was passionate about. Zoe chimed in next with her perfectly practiced concerned expression that she probably rehearsed in the mirror. "I just worry that you're settling, girl," she said with fake sincerity. "You always talked about marrying someone more ambitious, someone more on your level socially. Honestly, sometimes I think he's more in love with his stupid cars than he is with you." Brianna slurred slightly when she responded, clearly having had quite a bit to drink by this point. "You're probably right about the cars," she said with a laugh. "But whatever, he's easy to manage and he's got a good income. So that'll fund the house I want in Belmead and all the trips to Europe I've been planning. Once I've trained him properly, of course." Jess leaned forward with what could only be described as a predatory grin. "That's exactly why I told you to lock it down," she said approvingly. "My aunt married a plumber. Total bore. But he's loaded now with 3 locations. You just smile and nod at their boring shop talk and enjoy the financial security. He's completely whipped, girl. You've got that man wrapped around your little finger." Madison suddenly remembered another incident that she found particularly amusing. "Remember when he wanted to use some of the wedding budget for that car charity thing?" she said with a mocking tone. "And you just had to mention how the bridesmaids would be disappointed with cheaper dresses And he folded immediately? The charity she was referring to was one that was incredibly close to my heart, an organization that helps veterans with PTSD by using car restoration as therapy. I had wanted to donate $2,500 and volunteer my time to help with their programs. It was something I genuinely believed in, and I thought Brianna understood how important it was to me. But apparently, I had been completely manipulated. I had given in to her argument because she made it seem so critically important that the bridesmaids have the perfect dresses for her special day. Now I was hearing that it was all calculated manipulation designed to get her way. Pretty much, Brianna giggled in response to Madison's observation. He's so boring and predictable and so incredibly safe. He'd never suspect anything because he thinks I'm just his perfect princess who could never do anything wrong, Madison prompted with a sly grin that made my skin crawl. Speaking of not suspecting anything, the way she said it made it clear that there was more to this story, something even worse than what I had already heard. Brianna giggled and leaned in conspiratorially, like she was about to share a state secret with her closest confidants. Marcus is so freaking clueless, she said with obvious satisfaction. I met up with Brett 3 weeks ago when Marcus was at that parts expo in Memphis. The girls gasped dramatically at this revelation except for Jessica, who suddenly found her wine glass absolutely fascinating and couldn't seem to make eye contact with the camera. Their reactions told me everything I needed to know about what was coming next. You did not sleep with Brett, Zoe squealed with excitement, though her tone made it clear she hoped that Brianna had done exactly that. Brianna's facial expression said everything before she even opened her mouth to respond. The guilty smile, the pleased with herself look, it was all there for everyone to see. Maybe I did, and maybe it wasn't the first time since Marcus and I got together, she said with a casualness that made my blood boil. Holy shit, girl, Madison exclaimed as she high-fived Brianna like they were celebrating some kind of achievement. And Marcus has no idea? None at all? He's too busy with his work to notice anything, Brianna replied with complete confidence. Brett's been texting me the whole time I've been with Marcus. It's not serious or anything, but the sex is way better, and Brett actually knows how to have fun instead of talking about carburetors and engine blocks all the time. Jessica, who was clearly uncomfortable with the direction this conversation had taken, tried desperately to change the subject. The venue is really beautiful, though, she said awkwardly. Marcus seemed excited about the "What a complete idiot," Brianna interrupted, cutting off Jessica's attempt to redirect the conversation. All of them roared with laughter at this comment, except for Jessica, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the couch. As I sat there watching this unfold on my phone, I didn't feel the anger that I probably should have felt. Instead, what I experienced was a moment of perfect clarity, like someone had finally turned the lights on in a dark room that I had been stumbling around in for 3 years. Every red flag I had ignored, every compromise I had made, every time I had silenced that voice in my head saying something wasn't right, it all made perfect sense now. I had never been her partner or her equal. I was nothing more than a convenient source of income and stability while she lived her double life. Without hesitation, I typed a comment in the live chat using my actual account name, not some anonymous username, but my real name that everyone would recognize. Good to know what you really think, I wrote, and hit send. The comment section was moving quickly with messages from other viewers, but Madison saw my comment first. Her eyes widened in shock as she read it, and she immediately started trying to get Brianna's attention. "Brianna," she muttered urgently, pointing directly at the screen with obvious panic in her voice. Brianna leaned in closer to read the comment, squinting at the screen with the concentration of someone who had been drinking for several hours. When she finally processed what she was seeing and whose name was attached to the comment, her smile completely froze on her face. The color drained from her cheeks as pure panic took over her expression. I wasn't finished. I typed another comment, this one longer and more direct. "Brianna, since you're sharing with everyone how much of a dumbass I am, let's be completely clear about something. The wedding is off, the engagement is over. Find someone else's income to fund your Belmead dreams. Maybe Brett can pay for it all." She fumbled desperately with her phone, her hands shaking as she tried to figure out how to end the live stream. "Madison, stop it! End the stream!" she shouted frantically. But Madison was too shocked to respond quickly enough. The last thing I saw before the screen finally went black was Brianna's face. An expression of pure horror as she stared at her friends, who all looked equally stunned by what had just happened. Jessica, who had been uncomfortable throughout the entire conversation, looked directly at the camera and clearly mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," before the stream finally cut off. My phone immediately started lighting up like a Christmas tree. Both Brianna and Madison were calling and texting me simultaneously, but I wasn't interested in hearing whatever explanations or excuses they might have prepared. I put my phone on airplane mode and sat there in the sudden silence of my house, processing what had just happened and what I needed to do next. The first thing I did was retrieve the engagement ring from where I had been keeping it and lock it securely in my safe. That ring represented a $14,500 investment that I wasn't about to let disappear in the chaos that was inevitably coming. Then I sat down at my kitchen table with a legal pad and methodically made a list of everything I needed to handle in the coming days and weeks. Legal protection was at the top of the list, followed by financial separation, securing my property, notifying all the wedding vendors, and dealing with our shared living situation. I've always been a methodical person who approaches problems systematically, and this situation was no different. There was no point in getting emotional when there was serious work to be done and important decisions to make. I knew that reacting emotionally would only make things worse and potentially cost me more money in the long run. What I needed was a clear head and a solid plan to protect myself from whatever was coming next. Exactly 45 minutes after the live stream ended, my doorbell rang with the kind of insistent, repeated pressing that told me whoever was outside was not going to give up easily. When I opened the door, there stood Brianna with mascara running down her face in dark streaks, looking like a raccoon that had been caught in headlights. Her mother Patricia was right behind her, and from her posture and expression, it was clear that she was ready to demand to speak to a manager about this entire situation. "Marcus, please!" Brianna's voice cracked with desperation as she immediately launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. It was just a joke. Just stupid girl talk that didn't mean anything. We were all just being silly and saying things we didn't mean. None of it was serious. Patricia wasted no time stepping forward and adjusting her blouse in that way that women do when they're preparing for battle. "Young man, you have completely humiliated my daughter over some meaningless female bonding," she declared, with the authority of someone who was used to getting her way through sheer force of personality. "You cannot just call off a wedding over something so trivial and unimportant. Do you have any idea what people are going to say about this? What this is going to do to our family's reputation?" I leaned casually against the doorframe with my arms crossed, maintaining my composure despite the circus that was unfolding on my front porch. "Was it a joke when you called me a dumbass, Brianna?" I asked calmly. "Was it a joke when you said I was easy to manage and that my only value to you was funding your lifestyle? And was sleeping with Brett just another hilarious joke that I'm supposed to laugh off?" "No, I mean yes. I said those things, but it was Madison egging me on and all the wine we'd been drinking," Brianna stammered, clearly struggling to come up with a coherent explanation. "You know I love you, and I definitely didn't sleep with Brett. I was just making stuff up to sound cool in front of my friends." I couldn't help but shake my head at the absurdity of her explanation. "Right, because that's exactly what people in committed relationships do," I replied with obvious sarcasm. "They brag about fictional affairs to impress their friends and call their partners idiots for entertainment value. I don't think you do love me, Brianna, and I definitely don't love the person I just saw in that video," I continued. "That person was a stranger to me." "This is absolutely ridiculous," Patricia cut in, with increasing frustration. "We have deposits paid, a $26,000 venue, guests who have been invited from out of state, and hotel reservations that people have already made. You are going to fix this situation, Marcus, because I will not have my daughter publicly humiliated like this." I actually laughed at that point. I couldn't help myself. The sheer audacity of her statement was genuinely funny to me. "Patricia, your daughter just publicly announced her plans to use me as her personal ATM machine," I said. "She bragged about cheating on me and called me a dumbass in front of however many people were watching that live stream. There's nothing to fix here except the mistake I made when I proposed to her in the first place." "You don't understand the situation," Patricia hissed, stepping closer to me in what I assume was supposed to be an intimidating manner. "My daughter has a certain social position to maintain in this community. Her friends all know about this wedding, and they're all expecting to attend. How do you think this makes her look to everyone who matters? Like someone who got caught showing her true colors," I replied without hesitation. "And frankly, that's not my problem anymore." Brianna started sobbing even harder at this point, her voice becoming increasingly desperate and high-pitched. "My dress cost $7,200, and the venue is absolutely perfect," she wailed. "All my friends saw what happened on the live stream. You've completely ruined everything I've been planning for months." "You did that yourself," I replied firmly. "If you want someone to blame for this mess, I suggest you find a mirror." Patricia stepped even closer to me, jabbing her finger aggressively in my direction like she was trying to poke holes in my resolve. "If you think Colonel Williams is going to let you just walk away from this commitment, you're seriously mistaken," she threatened. "He's on his way here right now, and he's not going to be happy about how you're treating his daughter. Great, I said with genuine curiosity. I can't wait to hear what he thinks about his daughter cheating on me and calling me a dumbass in front of the entire internet. At that point, I'd had enough of this ridiculous confrontation. I told them both to leave my property immediately and not to come back. Patricia kept making various threats about what would happen if I didn't change my mind, but none of it concerned me in the slightest. I had done absolutely nothing wrong in this situation, and I had video evidence of Brianna's comments and her admission of cheating that would support my position if things escalated legally. Eventually, they did leave, but not before Patricia promised that this wasn't over and that I would regret my decision. The whole exchange had lasted about 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. My phone kept lighting up constantly with text messages from Brianna's friends throughout the rest of the evening. Some of the messages were angry, accusing me of overreacting and being unreasonable. Others tried to explain what Brianna really meant by her comments, as if there was some hidden context that would make everything acceptable. I took screenshots of every single message for documentation purposes, because when you're dealing with people like this, evidence becomes your best defense. I turned my phone back on just long enough to send a single text message to my best friend Tyler. Wedding's off? Need a place to crash tonight? Within 12 minutes, Tyler was standing at my front door with a duffel bag packed for me and his spare apartment key in his hand. He's the kind of friend who doesn't ask questions first. He just shows up when you need him. I don't want to be here when she comes back, I told him, as he helped me gather some essential items. And she absolutely will come back, probably with reinforcements. Damn right she will, Tyler agreed, handing me a beer while I packed my clothes. What the hell happened tonight? I showed him the screen recording I had made of the live stream, and his reaction was exactly what I expected from someone who actually cared about me. Jesus Christ, dude. What a complete snake, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. How long has this been going on? I grabbed my important documents, some clothes, and other essential items while Tyler waited. I made 2 crucial phone calls that night from Tyler's apartment. The first was to my lawyer, Victoria, who handles both my business legal matters and had helped a friend of mine through a particularly nasty breakup a few years earlier. The second call was to a locksmith to schedule having all my locks changed first thing the next morning. Send me that recording immediately, Victoria said, after I explained the entire situation to her. I know exactly what we're dealing with here, and we need to move quickly. Victoria wasn't just my business attorney. She had handled her fair share of ugly relationship breakups and knew how these situations could escalate. She had previously helped a buddy of mine when his ex-girlfriend tried to claim partial ownership of his construction business, despite never contributing a single dollar to it. I knew I was in good hands. Just as Tyler and I were about to leave my house the next morning to meet with the locksmith, Colonel Williams showed up at my front door. He was alone this time, and his expression was grim with the kind of military bearing that was evident even when he was wearing civilian clothes. The way he carried himself told me this wasn't going to be the same kind of confrontation I'd had with Patricia and Brianna the night before. "Marcus," he said, his voice level and controlled. "Got a minute to talk?" I nodded and gestured for Tyler to wait in the car while Colonel Williams and I stepped onto the front porch to have our conversation privately. "I saw the video," he said bluntly, getting straight to the point without any preamble or small talk. "Patricia showed it to me last night, thinking it would make me come down hard on Brianna's side and convince me to pressure you into reconciling." He paused for a moment and shook his head with obvious disappointment. "She was completely wrong about that. I honestly didn't know what to say in response to that revelation. I had been preparing myself for another confrontation, another attempt to guilt me into changing my mind about the wedding. I've always respected you, Marcus," Colonel Williams continued, his tone remaining steady and sincere. "You remind me of myself when I was your age, building something real with your own hands, working hard every day, honest to a fault even when it would be easier to cut corners. I raised Brianna to be better than what I saw in that video," he said, and I could see his jaw tighten with frustration and disappointment. "I failed somewhere along the way, and I take responsibility for that." Colonel Williams put his hand on my shoulder in a gesture that felt genuinely paternal. "Whatever happens next in this mess, I want you to know that I don't blame you for any of it. You're doing exactly what any self-respecting man should do in this situation." As he turned to walk back to his car, he paused and looked back at me one more time. "Do what you need to do to protect yourself, Marcus. I've got my own mess to sort out at home." Then he added something that really stuck with me. "And for what it's worth, I'm truly sorry this happened to you. You deserved better than this." The next morning, I met with Victoria at her downtown office. She had already reviewed the video recording thoroughly and had drafted initial paperwork before I even arrived. That's the kind of lawyer she is, always thinking 3 steps ahead, Victoria explained that we needed to focus on 2 main priorities moving forward. First, we had to protect me and my business from any potential harassment or retaliation. Second, we needed to quickly untangle any financial entanglements before they became more problematic and expensive to resolve. She laid out several legal documents across her desk as she spoke, explaining each one and how it would help protect my interests. I needed to document absolutely everything, every phone call, every text message, every face-to-face encounter. Since Tennessee is a one-party consent state, she explained that I could legally record any future interactions if Brianna showed up again. We would file for a temporary restraining order based on the harassment I had already experienced, with the live stream video providing solid legal grounds for the request. Halfway through my conversation with Victoria, my phone rang. It was Carlos, my shop manager, and he sounded stressed. He told me that Brianna and her mother were currently at my shop making a complete scene. They were yelling at customers in the waiting area and demanding that I come out to fix this mess immediately. Carlos had asked them to leave twice already, but Patricia was now threatening to call the Better Business Bureau and file complaints against my business. The situation was escalating, and he needed guidance on how to handle it. I told Carlos I was on my way to the shop, keeping him on speaker so Victoria could hear the situation developing in real time. When I asked if she wanted to witness this situation firsthand, she nodded immediately. "Absolutely," she said, already gathering her briefcase and car keys. "This kind of behavior will only strengthen our case for the restraining order." When Victoria and I arrived at my shop, the scene was exactly as chaotic as Carlos had described over the phone. Brianna was crying loudly in the customer waiting area, while Patricia was demanding that I come out and take full responsibility for destroying her daughter's life. My shop manager Carlos, who has been with me since I first opened the business, was standing between them and the workshop area like a human barrier, preventing them from entering the restricted zone where we had active equipment and ongoing projects. "Ma'am, I've already told you multiple times that Mr. Thompson is not available right now," Carlos said, with the kind of patience that comes from years of dealing with difficult customers. "This is a place of business, and if you don't leave voluntarily, I'm going to have to call the police." "Don't you dare threaten me," Patricia was practically screaming at this point, her voice carrying across the entire shop. "Do you have any idea who my husband is? Do you know what kind of connections we have in this community?" "Someone who's about to be very embarrassed when the police show up," Carlos replied calmly, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the increasingly hostile situation. I spotted 2 customers sitting uncomfortably in the waiting area, clearly trying to figure out whether they should leave or stay. Even worse, another customer had pulled out his phone and was actively recording the entire scene. This was exactly what I needed. A viral video of a domestic dispute happening at my place of business. Victoria stepped forward with the confidence of someone who had handled these kinds of situations many times before. "Ms. Parker, Mrs. Parker, I'm Victoria Michaels," she announced clearly. "I'm Mr. Thompson's attorney. You are currently trespassing on private property and harassing the employees and customers of this establishment." Patricia turned around, her eyes immediately narrowing when she realized that I had brought legal representation. "He already has a lawyer? Well, that just proves he was planning to abandon my daughter all along," she declared, as if having an attorney was somehow evidence of premeditated wrongdoing. "No, ma'am," Victoria replied, with the kind of even tone that lawyers perfect over years of practice. "It proves that he's responding appropriately to harassment and protecting his interests. I strongly suggest that you both leave immediately. Any further communication should go through my office." She handed Patricia her business card with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You cannot be serious about this," Brianna said, looking directly at me with a pleading expression. "Marcus, please tell her that we don't need lawyers involved in this. We can work this out between ourselves like adults. The time for working things out was before you publicly humiliated me and admitted to cheating," I said quietly but firmly. "Please leave my shop immediately." "You heard him," Carlos added with obvious relief that backup had arrived. "And just so we're completely clear about the situation, I've already called the police. They should be here within the next few minutes." That announcement finally got their attention in a way that nothing else had. Patricia immediately grabbed Brianna's arm with obvious urgency. "Come on, we're not finished with this situation, but we're definitely not handling it here," she said, practically dragging her daughter toward the exit. After they left, Carlos, who had witnessed the entire relationship from the beginning, just shook his head in amazement. "Boss, I've seen guys drop their cars at 80 miles per hour and walk away from accidents with less damage than what you just dodged," he said with genuine relief. That incident completely sealed my decision about how to handle this situation moving forward. I wasn't going to wait around for things to escalate even further. I had already provided Victoria with the complete recording of the live stream, plus the security camera footage of Brianna and Patricia's meltdown at my shop, courtesy of the surveillance system I had installed for exactly these kinds of situations. "This is textbook harassment," Victoria said during our meeting that afternoon, reviewing all the evidence we had gathered. "Given everything I'm seeing here, we need to move directly to legal protection without any delays. Let's file for a restraining order immediately." I nodded in agreement. "Do it. I know how these situations typically escalate, and she's not going to back off peacefully." "Smart move," Victoria replied, already typing notes into her laptop. "I'll file all the paperwork today and we should have a hearing scheduled within the next few days." Back at the shop, I gathered my 5 employees for a quick but important meeting. I needed to make sure everyone was on the same page about how to handle any future incidents. "Some of you witnessed what happened here earlier today," I began. "Brianna and I are no longer together, and based on what just occurred, she might try to cause more problems in the future. If she or her mother show up here again, do not engage with them under any circumstances. Call me immediately and call the police. Your safety and the safety of our customers is the top priority." Carlos nodded with understanding. "Already briefed the other guys while you were gone, boss. We've all got your back on this." I spent the rest of the afternoon doing damage control with the clients who had witnessed the earlier scene. I offered them discounts on labor costs, priority scheduling for future work, and anything else I could think of to counter the negative impression that Brianna and Patricia's behavior had created. Most of our customers were completely understanding about the situation, and a few even shared their own horror stories about bad breakups and difficult ex-partners. Tyler accompanied me back to my house later that evening to grab more of my belongings while the restraining order paperwork was being processed. When we arrived, I discovered that Brianna had let herself in using the spare key that I had completely forgotten she still had. She was sitting in my living room waiting for me, clearly having been there for some time. Tyler stood guard near the front door while I packed clothes, important documents, and my vintage Mustang parts collection. The same parts that she had already told her friends she was planning to get rid of once we were married. "You realize this is breaking and entering, right?" I said calmly while grabbing my laptop and chargers. "I have security cameras throughout this house, and this entire interaction is being recorded." "It's not breaking and entering when I have a key," she shouted back, as if having a key somehow gave her the legal right to enter my home without permission, after I had explicitly told her our relationship was over. "Watch me prove you wrong about that," I replied, zipping up my duffel bag with my essential items. The locksmith arrived just as we were leaving the house, and I made sure he changed every single lock while I stood there watching the entire process. I also had him install a smart doorbell camera system, the kind that records motion and sends instant alerts to your phone whenever someone approaches your property. The whole security upgrade cost me $920, but it was worth every single penny for the peace of mind it provided. Back at Tyler's apartment, I went into full financial protection mode. I canceled every shared account that Brianna had access to, removed her as an authorized user from all my credit cards, changed every single password on every account I owned, and set up fraud alerts on all my financial accounts. I had learned enough about nasty breakups from friends' experiences to know that money is often the first target when relationships go bad. I also started the unpleasant task of calling wedding vendors to cancel our arrangements. Most of the vendors had non-refundable deposit policies, but a few were surprisingly willing to work with me given the unusual circumstances. The venue manager was particularly understanding, especially after I showed him the video of what had happened during the live stream. They ended up refunding 65% of our deposit as a special circumstance exception to their normal policy. The temporary restraining order was granted in what Victoria described as record time, just 50 hours after we filed the initial paperwork. Victoria had highlighted the public humiliation aspect, the unauthorized entry to my home, the disruptive scene at my business, and the constant phone calls from Brianna as clear evidence of harassment. The judge agreed that her behavior warranted immediate legal protection. When Brianna was officially served with the restraining order papers, she absolutely exploded with rage. She called me from a new phone number that I didn't recognize, clearly trying to get around the legal restrictions that had just been put in place. "A restraining order? Are you kidding me? I'm your fiancé," she screamed into the phone. "Ex-fiancé," I corrected her calmly. "And you're violating the restraining order by calling me right now." I hung up immediately and forwarded the call log and her voicemail message to Victoria as additional evidence for the permanent restraining order hearing that was scheduled for the following week. I was genuinely surprised when Colonel Williams called me that evening. After everything that had happened with his wife and daughter, I wasn't expecting to hear from him at all. "Marcus, I heard that my daughter was served with legal papers today," he said, his voice carrying that same level tone I had come to recognize. "That's correct," I replied, bracing myself for whatever lecture or guilt trip might be coming next. "Good," he said flatly, which was definitely not the response I had been expecting. "Maybe it'll finally sink in that actions have real consequences." "You're not angry about the restraining order?" I asked, genuinely confused by his reaction. "Son, I'm absolutely furious, but not at you," he replied with obvious frustration. "I've spent 27 years trying to build character in that girl, teaching her about responsibility and integrity. And her mother spent the exact same amount of time systematically undermining every lesson I tried to instill." He paused, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "Patricia is at the house right now telling Brianna exactly how to fight this injustice and make you pay for embarrassing our family. I'm calling you from my truck in the driveway because I honestly can't stand to be in there listening to it right now." "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of all this," I said, genuinely feeling bad that he was dealing with fallout from his family's behavior. "Don't apologize for anything," he replied firmly. "This situation has been building for a long time, and it was inevitable that something like this would eventually happen. Look, I wanted to give you a heads up about something," Colonel Williams continued. "I overheard Patricia telling Brianna that they needed to fight fire with fire to get back at you. I have no idea what exactly that means, but based on what I've seen so far, it's not going to be anything good." "Thanks for the warning," I replied. "I've got security cameras installed at both the house and the shop now, and Victoria is documenting everything that happens." "Smart man," he said approvingly. "Keep your guard up and don't let them catch you off guard." Once Brianna realized that I wasn't playing games with the legal system and that I was serious about protecting myself, the harassment shifted to digital platforms. My Spotify account got hijacked, and all my playlists were deleted. My Amazon password was changed, locking me out of my own account. Then I received a notification about a bunch of charges on a credit card where I was the primary account holder, and she was still listed as an authorized user. A card I had completely forgotten about in all the chaos. She had gone on a $3,100 shopping spree at Nordstrom and Sephora, clearly trying to get back at me financially. I immediately called the credit card company, reported the charges as unauthorized use, and disputed every single transaction. They froze the account immediately and opened a formal fraud investigation. Brianna also decided to borrow my vintage Mustang parts collection from the storage unit we had rented together. These weren't just random car parts. They were rare finds that I had spent years collecting from estate sales and private collectors, worth approximately $2,400 in total. I filed a police report for theft immediately and added it to our growing legal case file. The shared storage unit was definitely a rookie mistake on my part. We had rented it together 7 months earlier when I was clearing space in my garage to make room for her home gym equipment that she used exactly twice before losing interest completely. I should have moved all my valuable parts out of there immediately after the breakup, but it had slipped my mind with everything else that was happening. Things took an even uglier turn when my sister Heather called me, sounding confused and concerned about some strange messages she had been receiving. "Marcus, why is Brianna telling everyone that you cheated on her?" she asked. "Her friend Zoe just texted me asking if I knew about your supposed affair with someone at the shop." I took a deep breath before responding. "It's completely untrue, Heather. She's the one who cheated, and now she's trying to flip the script and make me look like the bad guy." "Yeah, I figured as much," Heather said with obvious relief. "I just wanted to warn you that she's spreading this story around to anyone who will listen. Mom also got a weird phone call from Patricia yesterday, claiming that you broke Brianna's heart after she caught you with someone else. So now they were going after my family members, trying to turn them against me with completely fabricated stories. This was escalating beyond anything I had anticipated. That same day, Carlos pulled me aside at work with some concerning news that made my stomach drop. "Boss, we lost the Rodriguez account and the Freeman build," he said with obvious reluctance. "Both projects got canceled this morning." "That's really strange," I replied, immediately sensing that something wasn't right. "Did either of them give you a specific reason why they were pulling out?" Carlos looked genuinely uncomfortable as he delivered the bad news. "Mrs. Freeman said she had heard some disturbing things about how you treat women, and she didn't feel comfortable supporting the business anymore." The dots connected instantly in my mind, and I could see that Carlos had reached the same conclusion. "She's actively trying to destroy my reputation," I said, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief at how low this situation had sunk. The Rodriguez and Freeman projects were worth about $32,000 combined. Not enough money to completely sink my business, but definitely a significant hit to our quarterly projections. More importantly, both customers were well connected in Nashville's automotive community and could potentially influence other clients in our customer base if these false rumors continued to spread. I called Victoria immediately to report this new development. They're spreading outright lies about me now, and it's starting to cost me actual business, I explained. 2 female customers just pulled major projects based on completely false information about how I supposedly treat women. That's textbook defamation, Victoria said firmly. We need to add this to our existing case and file a separate defamation lawsuit. Do you have any direct evidence connecting Brianna or her friends to these specific claims? I'm working on getting that evidence right now, I told her. This is where my cousin's wife Jessica became crucial to building our case. Remember, she had been present during the original live stream and had clearly been uncomfortable with everything that was happening. The guilt over what she had witnessed was apparently eating at her, and she was finally ready to help set the record straight. They have a group chat where they're coordinating all of this, Jessica admitted when I contacted her. I can send you screenshots of everything they've been planning. Jessica had been friends with Brianna since their college days, but she was also married to my cousin Jake, which put her in an incredibly awkward position. She had been caught in the middle of this entire mess and clearly felt terrible about what was happening to me. The screenshots she provided were absolutely damning evidence of a coordinated harassment campaign. Madison had created a burner email account specifically for sending anonymous messages to my clients. These emails claimed that I had serious gambling debts, had cheated on Brianna multiple times, and was emotionally unstable and potentially dangerous to work with. In one particularly malicious message, Madison had specifically written about targeting female customers to hit him where it hurts, his precious business reputation. Brianna was actively encouraging this campaign, writing messages like, "He thinks he can just walk away from this and be perfectly fine. Let's see how he feels when his reputation is completely destroyed." The group chat contained detailed instructions about which clients to target first. They had clearly spent time going through my shop's social media accounts and website to identify specific customers, focusing particularly on women-owned businesses and female customers who had recently brought expensive cars in for restoration work. I immediately forwarded everything Jessica had provided to Victoria, along with documentation of the business losses I had already suffered. The temporary restraining order already specifically prohibits this kind of behavior, so they're actively accumulating violations, Victoria explained. This evidence would make the permanent restraining order a complete slam dunk, and it gives us solid grounds to pursue significant damages for the business losses you've suffered. Then my phone rang again. It was Colonel Williams, and he sounded even more serious than usual. "Marcus, I've been hearing some very concerning things about what's been happening," he said. I filled him in on the defamation situation and the coordinated campaign to destroy my business reputation. There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line before he responded. "Send me everything you have," he finally said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that came from years of military command. "This ends right now." The next few days turned into a complete blur of damage control and reputation management. I personally called every single female client in our database to get ahead of the situation. I explained that there were false rumors being spread by my ex-fiancé and that none of the claims they might hear were true. Most of our long-term customers were completely understanding and supportive, though a few remained skeptical until I could provide more context about what was really happening. Carlos came up with a brilliant idea to help counter the negative publicity. He suggested hosting a customer appreciation day at the shop, where we would offer free basic maintenance checks, heavily discounted oil changes, and catered food from a popular local steakhouse. The event cost me about $1,700 to organize, but it was worth every dollar because it brought in most of our regular customers and helped us directly address any concerns they might have had. Several people who attended the event told me that they had indeed received strange anonymous emails about me, but they hadn't believed the claims because they knew my character and the quality of work we consistently provided. 3 days before the scheduled court hearing, I received a formal letter from Brianna's attorney, John. The letter offered to settle the entire matter amicably if I would agree to drop my restraining order request and all defamation claims against his client. In exchange, Brianna would graciously agree not to pursue her own supposed claims of emotional distress and invasion of privacy against me. I immediately forwarded the settlement offer to Victoria, who called me back within an hour, and I could hear her laughing as soon as I picked up the phone. "Invasion of privacy for recording a public live stream that she broadcast to the internet?" Victoria said with obvious amusement. And emotional distress for what exactly? Being caught saying horrible things about you on camera? This is absolutely desperate posturing from their side. They know they have no legitimate case whatsoever. The hearing for the permanent restraining order and the preliminary defamation case was scheduled for exactly 1 week later. Victoria had expedited everything, arguing that the ongoing damage to my business warranted immediate judicial action. When the day finally arrived, Brianna showed up to court looking like she was auditioning for the role of a martyred saint. She was completely teary-eyed and wearing a conservative navy dress that I had never seen before in the 3 years we had been together. Gone were the designer jeans, crop tops, and trendy outfits that were normally her signature style. This modest dress had probably come straight from Patricia's closet as part of some calculated image makeover. Patricia was there as well, scowling at me from the moment I walked into the courtroom, as if I was somehow the villain in this entire story. Madison was also present, smirking from the back row, until the judge told her to sit down and remain quiet or be removed from the proceedings entirely. What I absolutely didn't expect was to see Colonel Williams sitting on my side of the courtroom. He was stone-faced and ramrod straight in his perfectly pressed suit, maintaining his military bearing even in this civilian setting. When I walked in and made eye contact with him, he gave me a slight, barely perceptible nod of acknowledgement. Brianna's lawyer, John, tried his best to paint her as the heartbroken, wronged woman who was simply processing her grief and emotional trauma in messy but understandable ways. Your Honor, Mr. Thompson unilaterally ended a 3-year relationship over one unfortunate conversation that was taken completely out of context, John argued. Ms. Parker's actions, while perhaps inappropriate in hindsight, were merely emotional responses to being suddenly abandoned without any warning or opportunity to explain herself. Victoria's response was simple and devastating. She just played the live stream recording for the court, then presented the security footage from my shop, followed by the complete documentation of the unauthorized credit card charges and Jessica's sworn testimony about the coordinated defamation campaign. The screenshots from the group chat were particularly damning evidence. When the judge saw Madison's message about making sure all his female customers know what a creep he is, his expression visibly hardened with disapproval. Your Honor, Victoria continued with professional confidence, my client took immediate and appropriate legal action rather than retaliating or escalating the situation. He sought proper legal protection through the courts while Ms. Parker and her associates launched a coordinated attack on his personal and professional reputation. She methodically submitted affidavits from clients who had canceled projects after receiving anonymous emails filled with false claims about my character. She also presented complete documentation of the disputed credit card charges and the official police report for the theft of my vintage car parts. Patricia was leaning forward in her seat, whispering furiously in John's ear with obvious desperation. He looked increasingly uncomfortable with whatever she was telling him, but he stood up to address the court. Your Honor, we would like to introduce a character witness for Miss Parker, he announced. Her father is present in the courtroom today and would like to speak on her behalf. The judge nodded his approval. Mr. Parker, please step forward and be sworn in. Everyone in the courtroom, myself included, expected Colonel Williams to approach their table to support his daughter. Instead, he stood up and walked directly to the center of the courtroom, positioning himself between both legal teams. Your Honor, I came here today with the intention of speaking the truth, not to defend behavior that is completely indefensible, he began, his voice carrying the authority and clarity that came from decades of military leadership. Patricia audibly gasped in shock. Brianna's eyes went wide with horror as she realized what was about to happen. I've known Marcus Thompson for 3 years, Colonel Williams continued. He is honest, hardworking, and has always treated my daughter with nothing but respect and consideration. The behavior you've seen documented in that video recording is not how I raised her, and it certainly doesn't represent the values I tried to instill in her throughout her life. He turned to look directly at Brianna with obvious disappointment. I am deeply ashamed and disappointed in who you have chosen to become. Patricia jumped up from her seat. Williams, what do you think you're doing? She hissed. The judge immediately banged his gavel. Ma'am, sit down immediately or I will have you removed from my courtroom. Colonel Williams continued speaking calmly, completely unaffected by his wife's outburst. Your Honor, I fully support Marcus Thompson's request for legal protection and financial damages. Actions must have consequences, and it's high time my daughter learned that fundamental lesson. After that testimony, the judge wasn't having any part of Brianna's victim act. Ms. Parker, this court takes a very dim view of using defamation as a weapon in personal disputes, he said sternly. The evidence presented here today is quite clear and troubling. He granted the permanent restraining order without hesitation. Brianna would be required to stay at least 120 yards away from me, my home, and my business at all times. The order prohibited any contact, whether direct or indirect. No phone calls, no text messages, no social media messages, and critically, no getting her friends to do her dirty work for her. For the defamation case, the judge issued a preliminary injunction, ordering Brianna, Madison, and all the other identified friends to immediately cease making any statements about me or my business to anyone. He also ordered them to send formal retraction emails to every single client they had contacted with false information. "Counselor," the judge said, addressing John with obvious coldness, "your client has demonstrated a clear pattern of harassment. She made unauthorized financial charges, trespassed on private property, disrupted his place of business, and coordinated a deliberate defamation campaign. If anything, Mr. Thompson showed considerable restraint by not pursuing criminal charges for these actions. The restraining order stands as written," he concluded firmly. The look on Brianna's face was one of pure shock and disbelief. Patricia was sputtering about filing an appeal and blaming everyone except her daughter for the situation. Madison looked like she had swallowed something particularly unpleasant and bitter. When we exited the courthouse, Victoria turned to me with a satisfied smile. "The defamation lawsuit will continue separately," she explained. "We'll be seeking actual damages for the lost business revenue, plus punitive damages for the clearly malicious nature of their coordinated actions. Based on what happened in there today, I'd expect they'll be very eager to settle this quickly." Colonel Williams approached me in the hallway outside the courtroom. I shook his hand firmly and thanked him for his unexpected support. As we walked out of the courthouse together, I started mentally calculating the total financial damage this relationship had cost me so far. There was the $20,000 in non-refundable wedding deposits, the $10,000 engagement ring which I still had, but would likely have to sell at a significant loss, the $3,100 in fraudulent credit card charges that were still being disputed by the bank, the $2,400 worth of stolen vintage car parts, and approximately $32,000 in lost business from the canceled projects. The rough total was around $67,500 in direct losses. That didn't even include the cost of the new locks and security cameras, the mounting legal fees, or the incalculable damage to my personal and professional reputation that would take months or years to fully repair. All in all, this relationship had cost me nearly $75,000. But as I thought about what my life would have looked like if I had actually married Brianna, I realized how much worse this situation could have been. I hadn't just dodged a bullet. I had avoided a nuclear explosion. Victoria turned out to be absolutely right about their eagerness to settle. Just 4 days after the court hearing, John called her office with a settlement offer designed to make this entire mess disappear quickly. They offered to settle the defamation case for $18,000 in business damages, plus all my legal fees. In return, they wanted me to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement about the live stream incident, essentially buying my silence about what had really happened. "Tell them I'll take the money, but absolutely no NDA," I told Victoria firmly. "That video recording is my insurance policy, and I'm not giving up my right to defend myself if they try anything else in the future." John came back with a counteroffer the next day, $23,000 plus all legal fees, with a very limited NDA that would only prevent me from posting the video online or sharing it on social media platforms. I would still be allowed to use it for legal defense purposes if necessary. After discussing it thoroughly with Victoria, I decided to accept this revised settlement. The money would help offset some of my losses, and the limited NDA still allowed me to protect myself legally while preventing them from claiming I was using the video for harassment or revenge. The final settlement documents were signed exactly 1 week later, officially closing this chapter of the legal proceedings. It's been 8 months now since that disastrous live stream, and the aftermath has been nothing short of pure karma working its magic on everyone involved. The restraining order and defamation judgment are now part of the public record, meaning anyone who searches for Brianna's name online can find information about what happened. Her dreams of becoming a social media influencer are essentially dead. No brand wants to work with someone who has documented legal issues related to harassment and defamation. All those wedding savings that she had been counting on to fund her lavish lifestyle are completely gone, eaten up by lawyer fees, settlement payments, and lost deposits from vendors who refused to work with her after word got around about the court case. Colonel Williams filed for divorce from Patricia just 3 days after the court hearing, ending 29 years of marriage in what seemed like a heartbeat. Word around Nashville is that he had finally reached his breaking point with Patricia's enabling of Brianna's worst behaviors and made his final decision after witnessing the coordinated defamation campaign that Patricia had helped orchestrate against me. He also completely cut Brianna off financially, which meant she had to move in with Patricia, who was now struggling with her own divorce proceedings. Colonel Williams's security consulting firm was worth substantial money, and Patricia had signed a prenuptial agreement back in the day that severely limited what she could claim in the divorce settlement. I heard through the Nashville business community grapevine that Colonel Williams sold their prestigious Belmead house and used the proceeds to buy a ranch property outside of Franklin, essentially starting over with a completely clean slate. Madison lost her marketing job after her boss, who happens to be an avid car enthusiast and occasional customer at my shop, discovered evidence of her harassment campaign against me. Apparently, she had been using company time and resources to send those defamatory emails, and interfering with someone else's business turned out to be seriously frowned upon by employers who value professional integrity and ethical behavior. Meanwhile, I moved into a new place across town that has significantly better garage setup and more space for my tools and ongoing projects. The new workshop has proper ventilation for painting and detailed mechanical work, plus enough room to expand my operations if I decide to grow the business further. Business has been absolutely booming since everything went down. I've hired 2 additional skilled mechanics and completely expanded our fabrication department to handle more complex custom work. We're currently booked solid for 9 months out, and I've started turning away basic maintenance work to focus exclusively on higher-margin custom builds that showcase our expertise. Carlos, who had my back throughout this entire ordeal, is now my business partner with an 18% stake in the company. His financial investment has significantly accelerated our expansion plans, and having him as a partner rather than just an employee has been incredibly beneficial for both of us. 3 months ago, Colonel Williams stopped by my shop unexpectedly. He walked in carrying a bottle of premium bourbon and a set of rare Mustang cylinder heads that I had been actively hunting for through various collector networks for over a year. "Thought you could use these for that 1969 fastback project you mentioned working on," he said with a genuine smile, setting both items down on my workbench. "And I figured 2 good men could share a drink and talk about better things than all the drama we've been through." I accepted both gifts gratefully, genuinely moved by the gesture. Despite everything that had happened with his family, Colonel Williams had maintained his integrity and his friendship with me. "Some connections are definitely worth keeping," I replied, and I meant every word of it. We still meet up every other week for drinks and car talk at a local bar that caters to automotive enthusiasts. Our conversations range from technical discussions about restoration techniques to broader business strategy and life philosophy. It's been refreshing to maintain a genuine friendship that emerged from such a difficult situation. Looking back on this entire experience, I realize how close I came to making the biggest mistake of my life. If I hadn't happened to see that live stream, if I hadn't heard Brianna's true feelings in her own words, I would have married someone who saw me as nothing more than a convenient source of funding for her lifestyle fantasies. The signs were all there from the beginning. Her complete disinterest in my work, her inability to support me during important moments, her constant focus on material things and social media image over substance and character. But I was so caught up in the excitement of being chosen by someone who seemed so focused on appearances that I ignored my own instincts and the advice my father had given me years ago. The financial cost was significant, nearly $75,000 when everything was calculated. But it was money well spent to avoid what would have been a much more expensive and emotionally devastating divorce down the road. Discovering someone's true character before marriage rather than after is worth any amount of money. My business is thriving like never before. I have a beautiful new workshop space that's perfectly suited to my needs, and I've learned invaluable lessons about recognizing red flags in relationships. Most importantly, I've been reminded of the importance of surrounding myself with people who share my values and genuinely support my goals, rather than just tolerating them as a means to an end. The restraining order is still in effect, and I haven't heard from Brianna or any of her friends in months. Based on what I've heard through mutual acquaintances, she's still living with Patricia and struggling to rebuild any kind of meaningful life or career. The social media influencer dreams have been permanently derailed, and her reputation in Nashville's social circles has been severely damaged. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is discovering who someone really is before you make a permanent commitment to them. That live stream, as devastating as it was in the moment, turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me. It saved me from years of manipulation, financial exploitation, and emotional abuse that I never would have seen coming. Now I know exactly what to look for in a partner. Someone who genuinely respects what I do, supports my goals, and sees me as an equal rather than a convenient source of income. Someone who would be proud to attend my business award ceremonies instead of skipping them for social media opportunities. Someone who understands that building something meaningful takes time, effort, and dedication, and who wants to be part of that journey rather than just enjoying the benefits. The whole experience taught me that sometimes the most painful revelations are actually the greatest gifts you can receive.